Hello everyone, how are you? So today we are going to start with a new lesson which is buildings, paintings and books. So far we have learnt about kingdoms, traders, trades, varnas, jati, etc. So today we are going to learn about buildings, paintings and books which were the key evidence of existence of the early human settlements in the Indian subcontinent. So in this chapter we are going to learn about the iron pillar, buildings in brick and stone, how a stupa is made, painting, the world of books, recording and preserving old stories. How are these old books, stories, where were they written and how are they preserved even till now? Stories told by ordinary people. There were men and women who used to write stories in their day-to-day lives about their day-to-day activities. So what were those stories? And writing books on science. So we will see how science was started, how it was discovered and what role did it play in the early human settlements. So let's begin. To begin with, let's see the story of Maruta Sami and the iron pillar. So do you know where the iron pillar is? Iron pillar is located in New Delhi near Qutub Minar. So when Maruta Sami went to see the iron pillar, his brother dragged his wheelchair, pushed his wheelchair to the iron pillar. It was a little difficult, but somehow they reached it, and when they saw it, they were astonished that such an old monument, such an old iron pillar still exists in our time. How is that so? How was iron preserved? Because we see that iron is a metal which gets rusted after a period of time. But how? Still it exists and it's not rusted at all. So let's see. So the iron pillar. The iron pillar at Meheroli, it is located in the region of Meheroli in New Delhi. It is a remarkable example of skill of craftsperson. Craftsperson at that time, such as blacksmiths, they used to work with iron and they used to make weapons, tools, etc. from it. So in one such time, there was a blacksmith who constructed the iron pillar of Meheroli. It is made of iron. The material, the metal used to make this pillar is of iron, and it is 7.2 meters high and weighs over 3 tons. This pillar was made nearly 1500 years ago. We know the date because there is an inscription on the pillar that gives us the evidence as to when it was built. This iron pillar is a great proof of the skill and the craftsmen who built this. It is not yet rusted all over these years. So, the iron pillar. It was not just one pillar that was made of iron. There were many. Apart from that, there were many arts and tools and weapons which are made from iron. Yet they did not rust with time. I am sure if you visit the museums in your cities, you will see plenty of tools, weapons, etc., sharp knives that were used by kings, farmers, agriculturists at that time in order to process and fight battles. But why have they not yet rusted? For example, if you have that bicycle at your home which is made up of iron, after some time it catches rust, the red dust which degrades and eats up the metal iron. But why these weapons, these pillars have not rusted? So there is a science behind it known as metallurgy. So ancient Indian metallurgists made various major contributions to the metallurgical history of the world. Metallurgy is a science of metals and how they are processed, at what temperature they should be burnt, they should be melted in order to produce things from it, so that the quality and the resources are used in an optimum way. During the excavations, during the extradition of these old things, the historians and the archaeologists found many these things, and that they show that the Harappans had the knowledge of copper metallurgy. So they knew that how it should be processed, at what temperature it is best to process copper, and how they can be modified at the correct temperature. They were master craftsmen. They were specialists who knew what they were doing. Even bronze was manufactured by them by mixing copper and tin. So bronze is a metal which is produced, which is an alloy, a mixture of two or more metals. Bronze was such a metal, such an alloy which was made by using copper and tin. Harappans belong to the Bronze Age. So the Harappan and the Indus Valley civilization was under the Bronze Age. Their successors belong to the Iron Age. So it continued from Bronze Age till the Iron Age. During ancient times, highly advanced types of iron, forged iron, wrought iron, cast iron was made in India. So iron is not just of one type, there are so many different types of iron. The iron that you see in workshops today is not the same as it used to be. There are quality of metals. For example, in gold also, we have different qualities, isn't it? Like 18 carat, 22 carat, 24 carat, right? So in iron also there are grades and qualities which determine which type of iron will be used to produce what kind of tools and goods. So now apart from iron, there were construction sites where buildings and houses were built. So what were these buildings constructed from? These buildings were constructed using bricks and stones. So they no longer used the temporary settlements, they started building bricks and stones. Meaning of the word stupa. So one such building that was constructed in the early times was a stupa. As you see in the picture, and I am sure you must have heard of Sanchi stupa, which is located in Madhya Pradesh. What is a stupa? The word stupa means a mound. Do you see this mound over here? The dome shape on a building is known as a stupa. There are a lot of monuments which are built according to this dome shaped and they are known as stupa. But stupas in the Indian and Hindu history, they were the places which were used by Buddhist monks and they were used as Buddhist religious buildings. There are several of the stupas around the Indian subcontinent. They are round, tall and big, as well as small. So the size and the shapes of these stupas depend from place to place. They are different. Some of them are really huge, but some of them are small. But one common factor among them is that they have a very big mound over it, a dome shape over it. So these have certain common features. Let's discover what that common features are. So as we discussed earlier that these stupas were the Buddhist religious places, there was bodily remains and ashes of Buddha and his followers found. Apart from that, there were also few things which were found with them. Despite the distinctions among these shapes and sizes of stupas, there were common features with these stupas. So generally, there is a small box placed at the center of the stupa. This may contain bodily remains or ashes of Buddha and his followers. As we discussed earlier that stupas were Buddhist religious places. So these boxes that were placed in the middle, they used to contain bodily remains, ashes or things belonging to Buddha or his followers that used to practice their religion and meditate over there. So what were these things that were found with the ashes? This may be precious stones used by them, beads, bones, etc. or some kind of utensils and things such as coins. This box is known as a relic casket. So the name of this box is Relic Casket. This box was covered with earth as in soil. Later on a mud layer, a layer of mud, brick and baked bricks used to cover it. The structure was sometimes covered with carved stone slabs. So apart from that, these boxes, they were not left out in open for anybody to open it and take the things from it. They were covered with earth. First they were covered with soil and earth. Later on a layer of mud, clay was put on them. After that there were baked bricks which were settled and arranged on it so that there would be a platform, it would be protected from anybody coming in the stupa. And later on, after the last layer was a stone slab. Generally a path known as Paradakshina Patha was laid around the stupa. So how would you enter the stupa? For example, if you have a stupa, then there was a path laid around it which is known as Paradakshina Patha. This was surrounded with railings. This path, this Paradakshina Patha was surrounded by railings so that people could use them if they are walking there. Entrance to the path was through gateways. So there was entrance to these pathways so that people could go, and these were gateways. Devotees used to walk around the stupa. Just like in Hindu temples, there is a precision that whenever we visit a temple, we take a walk around the main temple. it was similar with stupas. Whenever devotees used to come and visit these places, these Buddhist religious places, they used to walk around the stupa. Both railings and gateways were generally decorated with sculptures. So it was nothing just we let the stones to make gateways or railings. These railings and gateways has intricate designs and inscriptions on it. And there were sculptures as well, which told the stories and evidences of existence of Buddha and his followers in those stupas. So, as you see here in this slide, there is a map given. So, what is given in this map? It is given Aryavrat. So, there are a lot of things. As you see, this was the inner Indian subcontinent, and then there is a yellow portion which was Aryavrat, which was led by the Mauryan Empire. So, can you locate the cities in Aryan Empire and the inner city? So, what is important in this map is to note where Amaravati is. Amaravati is a city where we found a lot of stupas. Can you locate Amaravati in this map? It is located right here in the eastern coast of Indian subcontinent. Let's have a detailed look at it. This is the place where a magnificent stupa once existed. There was a very beautiful, magnificent, amazing stupa which was built there in Amaravati. Many of the stone carvings for decorating the stupa were made about 2000 years ago. So as we discussed that there was a pathway and gateways, and on the stupa there were sculptures and inscriptions. So these sculptures in Amaravati, the stupa of Amaravati, they were almost 2000 years ago. The great stupa at Sanchi, Madhya Pradesh. So this is a picture of Sanchi stupa in Madhya Pradesh. You can even visit it now. Earliest Hindu temples. So this we talked about Buddhist religious places, but what about Hindu temples, Indian temples? Along with the Buddhist stupas, we also found evidences and proofs of existence of early Hindu temples. Hindu was a religion at that time, just like there was Jainism and Buddhism. So the Hindus, they used to pray to gods such as Vishnu, Shiva, Durga, etc. So these Hindu temples, they were dedicated to these deities, Vishnu, Shiva, etc. They were worshipped in shrines. So these deities, gods and goddesses were worshipped in these shrines. For example, temples of Bhitargaon in Uttar Pradesh, they are dedicated to one of these deities or gods. Bhitargaon's Hindu temples were built about 1500 years ago. It was a very, very long time that these temples were built. These temples were built of baked brick and stone. So they were not constructed from temporary material or fodder, but rather baked bricks, strong baked bricks were used apart from stones to make these Hindu temples. Sculpture of Amravati. So here, as you see in this picture, there is a sculpture from the stupa of Amravati. Let's find out more about these Hindu temples. The most important temple was the room known as Garbhagraha. So the most important part of the temple, there were Hindu temples and there were different parts in that temple. There was entranceway, there were halls, etc. But what was the most important part? It was a room called as Garbhagraha. Here the image of the chief deity was placed. So whoever that temple belonged to, whichever deity the temple belonged to, the image of that chief deity was placed there. That chief god or goddess was placed there. It was here that the priests used to perform their prayers, rituals, and devotees used to come and offer worship to the deity. It was the place where the devotees used to come and pray to the god. So for example, if you go to temple nowadays, of course there are warehouses, there are storerooms, but as soon as you enter, you see an idol placed in front of you. In the earlier times, there were Garbhagriha where the deity or the idol was placed for devotees to pray and priests to practice rituals. Generally, a tower known as a shikhara was built on top of the Garbhagriha. Do you observe that in all the Hindu temples, there is a tower? For example, if this is my temple, there is a tower on it. That tower is known as a shikhar. Most Hindu temples also had a space known as the mandap, where people could assemble. So there was a big hall, it was known as mandap, where all the people and devotees could assemble. In South India, Mahabalipuram and Aihole, two towns were very famous for their temples. The Mahabalipuram city in the southern part of India, which even exists now, was very famous for its Hindu temples, and you can visit some of the magnificent sculpted temples even in these days. Some of the finest stone temples were built in these towns. Three of these major temples or famous temples are the Rathas, Shore Temple and Durga Temple. These temples were built about 1400 years ago. So, we discussed that the Hindu temples, they were made from different baked stones and bricks. These temples were made from single stone, so they were carved from one big huge single stone. So, monolith or single stone temples are also very beautiful and impressive, and if you go and visit in the southern part of the Indian subcontinent, you will see some of the major monolithic temples even in today's time. These temples are carved out of a single huge piece of stone, as we discussed. Making of this was very different from what the other temples and the baked brick temples were like. So, these temples were very different from the baked brick temples, as in the brick temples they were laid in a structurized way, in a symmetrical way to create walls, stupas, etc. But in the monolithic temples, only one big huge stone was used. It was carved and made hollow in order to make a temple out of it. So in monolithic temples, it was not like that you were making brick temples, so you would first lay the first stone, then the other stone, then the other brick, etc. But rather the craftsmen, they used to work from top to bottom. So they started to carve the top of the temple first, and then they moved towards the downer part of the temple. So here is an image. As you can see here, this is an image of a monolithic temple. What is being shown here? That there is a one big large stone which is carved. There are sculptures. There is an entryway where people could go. So this was an early temple at Bhitargaon, Uttar Pradesh. This was a temple which was made in Bhitargaon, Uttar Pradesh, and it was made around 1500 years ago. Monolithic temples in Mahabalipuram. As we discussed that it was in mainly southern part of the Indian subcontinent that monolithic temples were built. We understood what are monolithic temples. Now let's see few examples of these temples. Each of these was carved out of huge pieces of stone, and this is why they are known as monolithic. So the time belonging to Stone Age was known as Lithic period. So these are made from lith as in stone, and they are mono, one stone. That is why if we combine the words mono and lithic, it becomes a monolithic temple. While brick structures were also built up by adding layers of bricks from bottom to upwards, whereas in monolithic temples the craftsmen and the workers, they used to work from top to downwards. Now the Durga Temple at Aihole, it was built about 1400 years ago. Now imagine the huge stone that must have been used to build this temple.
To watch the complete video, download the Upbind educational app from Play Store and App Store.